Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is the developing situation in Syria with, of course, the end of the 13-year civil war. We've seen that the rebels have taken control, and we also saw the President Bashar al-Assad fleeing to Russia and, of course, being provided asylum there. We've also seen transition taking place with an interim prime minister in place till March 2025, something which the former Prime Minister has also associated himself with and has also extended his help with reference to the transition in terms of the opposition leaders. But what is going to happen, particularly with reference to what is going on in the country and, of course, in the ways in which it's going to impact the region and the political environment of the country itself, is something that, of course, remains to be seen. So we're going to be taking a look at what that means, particularly for the political environment of Syria, and then, of course, moving forward, what is going to be the future. Then, of course, we've also seen with reference to the very important issue of refugees and displaced persons. We've also seen that this is something that, of course, has been impacting people from Syria for quite some time now. And we've seen that countries like Turkey have talked about opening up their borders for the return of these Syrian refugees and people across the country. So what really is going to be the stance with regards to that and how easy that is going to be is something that we're going to be taking a look at. Our next segment is going to be taking a look at the situation in Pakistan with reference to the stock exchange. We've seen that a positive trajectory was something that was viewed previously, but then again we saw that there was a plunge of 1,000 points with reference to different aspects of political gains that have been attributed to this change. But what really is going to be the way forward with regards to this and the impact, of course, of potential decrease in interest rate when we see the committee appointed by the Prime Minister actually sitting down on the 16th of December. Whether or not that, of course, takes place is something that remains to be seen. So we're going to be taking a look at this fluctuation with reference to the Pakistan Stock Exchange and how much can we actually gauge from these numbers. That is going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've been joined online by former ambassador Mr. G.R. Baluch and Mr. Karim, associate fellow at King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies in Riyadh. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. And I'll start with you, Ambassador Saab, with reference to what we've seen happen in Syria. Of course, it is a big change in the country and in the region as well. And there, of course, are a lot of players involved in this particular change and the way that we've seen things moving around both within and outside of Syria. But let's start from within Syria as to what is happening at the moment. We have al-Bashir as the interim leader of the country till March 2025. And I want your take on what this change represents and whether or not you think it is moving in a positive direction where we can have the people actually look into their own political future and choose for themselves.
Thank you, Sana. I think what has happened in Syria just in a short period of 11 days in a position which has been at war with the regime in Damascus for the last 12, 13 years, suddenly finds a way to march from Aleppo to Homa to Homs and to Damascus, and is greeted with open arms and without any resistance. And that once the sixth largest army of Syria just melted into thin air. So all that really requires further evidence to come. But several things are very clear, that when you have people not included in the governance, when you have economies crumbling, when you open up too many fronts, when dependence is on the foreign assistance to sustain, I think this is what happens. And also the causes could be many. But when a country allows other countries to interfere, and when it becomes a playground for other regional and global actors, unfortunately, the people of that country suffer, as we know that they have been suffering. I have had the privilege of representing Pakistan in Damascus, Syria for 5.5 years as a diplomat. And I have seen it. It was Hafiz al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad's time. And I've seen it very close by. That society did have, and they were very visible fault lines within the society. It was very obvious that this regime, this governance was not inclusive, that people were denied their rights. In fact, Syria saw a civil war kind of a situation in 80s and then 90s. And we did witness, and the world witnessed, how brutally those civilian uprisings were quelled by Hafiz al-Assad. And that also we know that hundreds and thousands of people were languishing in jails without trial. So now what happens? I think it's a seismic change and a new global, of course, we'll talk about it later, but regionally, I think a new balance of power looks like being established. Obviously there are certain, it's a bit early to say, but what we can see that which countries have emerged as countries with advantage. If not, I can't use the word victors, because in such situations there's no victor, categorical victor. So I think Turkey has emerged as a preponderant regional power, in the Middle East, where I think Turkey has played a role in bringing in this training, assisting, and then probably in collaboration with some global actors. And of course, Israel, I think, is the biggest beneficiary, and I think, to be specific, Netanyahu, who was to be humiliated after this bloody war, but seems that he has turned around that, and this, what is it called, the consequence, unintended consequence, which probably those who planned those operations in October did not foresee. So I think we will see weakening of the Arab as a resistance to Israel. We'll see further imposition of a peace, even if it comes at a later stage, but a peace which will be on the terms of Israel. We'll see, unfortunately, stability is pretty far yet, because what we have seen in Libya, we have seen in Iraq, we have seen in Afghanistan, that these fighters who only know fighting, they are far from knowing the intricacies of governance. Now this challenge, how will they meet? Will they be able to rebuild the completely destroyed economy, bring in a governance system which includes everybody? How will they bridge in those sectarian differences and fault lines which have further been widened? And of course, most of all, the interference, as we know that they have been assisted. Now, will those regional powers stay back and let these now freedom fighters, as they call them, really rebuild their country, Syria, on a more democratic, more progressive, and move the country towards more political stability and economic progress? I think there's several questions which we really cannot answer at this point of time. Yes, no.
Right, absolutely. And Omar, I want your perspective on this as well, particularly in terms of what this means for the political future of Syria. And while, of course, there seems to be a lot of celebration as to what has ended, it seems that we've seen previously also in different countries that such transitions are not always smooth and are not very easy, and perhaps are not also linked with reference to democratic procedure or like the will of the people. And so I want your take in terms of the power dynamics and stakeholders that exist at the moment with reference to remnants of the previous regime and the rebel forces, and now, of course, the interim prime minister.
Thank you, Sana. So I think that one immediate implication of these events is that the majority of the country, the Sunni majority, that in a manner had remained marginalized throughout the years of Hafez al-Assad or Bashar al-Assad, they, even if it is not the case, but they feel empowered. So this has consequences. This line of cities, Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and Damascus, and then Dara. These are all Sunni heartlands, and they you can see it even during the Civil War as well, even in the 1980s as well, that they were the hotspots of dissent against the Ba'athist regime, and then they were quelled. So you can see that there is a lot of jubilation, a lot of celebrations within these cities and the countryside. I can say that for the Alawite community, I was reading something today that Bashar al-Assad and Hafez al-Assad, their regime made sure that the community sticks with them, and that also it sticks with them so tightly that it doesn't have a future, unfortunately. So, from their perspective, I would say that they are back to the times when they were a marginalized community. And I would also say that this is perhaps these events show the end point or the materialization of the colonial scheme, the colonial patchwork through which Syria was created. And today, the rebels, I think HDS is clearly the main player here. Interestingly, I mean, this is another point which is very important, that Jolani is a survivor in this war. I know there were 10 or 15 very prominent rebel names who probably those leaders were much more smarter, much more charismatic, much more competent than Jolani, but they were either killed or sidelined. Or, and Jolani, he has emerged as a victor of this. And I guess that still there are limitations to this new government in Damascus. One thing I can say that HTS, the way they have behaved, they have an experience of governance of 7 years in Idlib, the rebel enclave. So this, the prime minister, who has been made interim prime minister, he used to be the governance in charge in Idlib. So I guess that there is some sort of a model which they will try to replicate. Indeed, Syria will not remain a secular republic. That's pretty much, I think, understandable. But HTS is behaving till now relatively maturely in its dealings with the Kurds, in its dealings with the Druze, and even with the Alawite community. I think the major challenge will come. One challenge is, of course, there from the Israel, and HTS doesn't have the means to confront it. And the other challenge will come from different localized rebel groups within these Sunni areas in the south, but also in the north, the rebels which are backed by Turkey, because those groups, they are acting right now as proxies. And I think HTS would definitely want to have a national project rather than a proxy-oriented governance scheme. And I think in this regard, it may also again find itself into crosshairs to some extent with Turkey as well, because all of the bordering countries of Syria, they have their own interests, and they are right now considering the vacuum. They are accelerating their moves to fulfill them. And this is why we are seeing what Israel is doing, and also there is a lot going on in the north. And I guess that it's actually quite surprising that 8 or 9 years ago, Jabhat al-Nusra, the first iteration of this group, was actually an Al-Qaeda sub-branch, and it was hated by most of the Syrian revolutionaries, and Syrian people also didn't like it that much. But today, I think most of the people think that it is the only possible actor that can stabilize the situation and can bring the country back from its war-torn environment to some sort of stability.
Right. Faisal, I want your perspective on that too, particularly in terms of the aspects of international players in the equation as well. And while, of course, we want this transition to be smooth and we want a political future for Syria, there seems to be a lot of elements that were involved previously as well, and perhaps will continue to do so. And I want your take on what that means right now in the current state of affairs, and also in terms of those international players exerting their own powers into this political sphere of influence.
Yes, and obviously, when we look at today's Syria after Al-Jolani, he has taken over. First of all, while Umar was talking about Alawites, one fact about Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, when he was a late teenager, he fell in love with someone who was from Alawites, and both of the families from both sides, they did not approve it, and that's how he actually took his own course towards later on he joined Al Qaeda, and he went towards that kind of side. So that aspect is still there. So far, I mean, it is being claimed by HTS that they are not going to take any revenge from, any other sects or any other religions, if there are any. And what they are going to do is they are going to restore peace. But when it comes to Idlib, the situation was entirely different. The administration there, the administrative setup there, it was quite successful by the HTS, and it was being considered as they have a total control over there. But when it comes to the whole country, the dimensions would entirely be different. In that context, that in Idlib, it was the same sect that was they were ruling over. But when they come towards the whole Syria, of course, they would have different segmentations of Syria to look after. In that context, of course, they will be facing many challenges, or facing many makeshift kind of administrative setups out there that do not hurt the other sects of Syria and other religions of Syria at the same time. So it would be quite tricky for them. So far, if we look at the neighboring countries, of course, we know that Turkey is playing its role. Turkey has been playing its role, and when it comes to future, Turkey will play its role, no doubt about it, because they have a very good length of sort of influence within the HTS, and people who are getting back to Syria from Turkey itself, they are quite influential as well, in terms that they were the very people who actually left Syria, and they were considered as people who were running successful businesses, who were landowners, and when they get back to Syria, of course, they will be claiming all of that as well, and they would turn out to be very influential people in the coming days and months. When we talk about Israel, I mean, Israel is having its own nefarious design, which through which we are coming to know that Mount Hermon, which is hardly around 45 kilometers from Damascus itself, they have the presence of ground troops there. They have that is actually the highest point of Syria, where they have captured it, and they want to, of course, keep it with themselves. One would always predict that they want to have it for easy access, easy artillery access to Damascus and all around. And when it comes to the neighboring Golan Heights, I mean, Golan Heights, they have already claimed it. They say that it was ours, and it is ours, and it will be ours, and nobody would be taking any measures to take it back from us. Be it Jolani himself, hailing from a family, they are considered as the actual Golanis, who are considered to be, of course, the honors of Golan Heights. And when it comes to Israel, of course, Israel is not paying any heed to Oslo Accord, in which they committed to it that they will never, of course, cross the boundaries when it comes to capturing the land. But as soon as the collapse of Assad was seen in the region, they simply said, oh, our pledge was with Assad, not with Syria as a state. So that is why we are taking the preemptive measures. If we talk about the Americans, Americans have been day and night bombing the ISIS hideouts as well. That too considered as the preemptive measure which they are taking. And if Israel was, since last night they have bombed 150 places. and in them 150 places they are claiming that there were weapons of mass destruction, I mean WMDs once more. And as long as them WMDs were in the hands of Bashar al-Assad, it was all okay, because he was just gassing and he was just throwing them chemical weapons only on his people, and that didn't bother the world at all. But now when it comes into the hands of HTS, then there is a threat that they might use it against the saner world called Israel, and the only democracy of Middle East called Israel, and they want to of course take the preemptive measures to take a control over it. I was going through many of the statements, and I was talking to myself saying how overnight things get changed. If we talk about British Foreign Secretary, his statement was the most catchy statement when he said that Assad, the word Assad of Arabic means lion. So Assad of Damascus, lion of Damascus, that used to consider himself as a lion, now he has ran away like a rat to Moscow. These are the sort of compliments he's attracting from the very people he's been sitting around, he's been very cozy with when he was conducting all of these chemical weapon attacks, and nobody said from the western side. Reason being, at that time they had their economic endeavors to look after, and they wanted to have some kind of leverage with Bashar al-Assad. Yes, Bashar al-Assad being someone who educated himself from Britain, who was an eye specialist, a doctor, and who married from Britain as well, someone who was raised and groomed in Britain, and he married to her. At that time it was all okay. But if somebody runs away to Moscow, if somebody had previously had the support of Wagner Group and he's been bashing everyone, all of the stakeholders were of course looking at it that Moscow was playing role in Damascus. Now suddenly they go against it, and when it comes to the other states of Middle East, I mean I feel greatly for the countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, then Bahrain, then Qatar. All of these countries, they have put day and night into creating their economies, the peaceful economies, the peaceful environment for FDIs, the peaceful environment for the investments in their countries. Why? Because they have been of course keeping away all of this fuss. But now what has happened is Israel and other countries at the same time, they are creating this whole fuss to be a monster against the other rest of the Middle Eastern countries as well, so that the countries who were thinking about getting rid of Americans, telling Americans to please go back, we are all okay with our countries, we don't have any troubles, but you being in our country, it is a trouble for ourselves. Reason being, then Iran is there and they are always having a go on us just because of one reason, that all of these Westerns are present in here. So we don't want that kind of fuss. We just want to be a peaceful country. As we know that countries like Saudi Arabia, they have Vision 2030, they have Neom City, and all of these investments, they want to revolutionize their country, and they don't want them kind of security hazards on the way. That is why they already had a plan to of course get rid of all of these security phenomena and go towards the economy and go towards the tourism side. But now they are posing another threat for them countries, so that they can keep on going with the American presence, with the Western powers to be present in there, so that eventually if they are present there, it is a kind of a safe token for Israel to use at any time, and Israel would be allowed to do whatever it can do. By the way, there is another thing I wanted to say. Today I was going through a criticism of the countries like Russia, that they were accomplice in sort of war crimes against all of these Syrians who were in the jails, because they were accomplice, because they were of course extending a hand, helping hand 10 years ago to Assad. I mean, today they are talking about war crimes of Bashar al-Assad, but who would talk about the war crimes of Netanyahu? Netanyahu's associates are sitting in the Western countries. Netanyahu's associates are the very associates who are bragging about these things and who are raising these points.
Right.
They are the very people who are actually giving arms to Netanyahu to conduct a genocide in Gaza, a genocide in the Middle East.
Right. We're going to, of course, take a look at that as well. And Farrukh, you'll have your time to respond to that. I know that's what you've been thinking. But this is something, of course, very, very important in terms of the international dynamics and the countries involved and, of course, what is going to happen in the larger context of things. But while you also add to this discussion, I want your take also on the possibilities then of any humanitarian help or support for the people that have been displaced throughout this war and the possibilities of these countries actually helping in that movement. We know that Turkey has done that or initiated that at least, but in terms of the possibilities of that actually taking place in a manner which is appropriate for the people, do you see that happening?
Right. Thank you very much, Sana, for the question. Before me, actually, Faisal actually spoke. So I was thinking on a lighter note that, you know how they keep on saying that AI is going to replace all our jobs. So I was thinking that here's another career for Faisal. He can be a televangelist, an effective one. So touch the screen, heal, right? But apart from that, regarding...
We have Dr. Umar touching his ears, but go ahead.
Okay, I hope he doesn't want to speak. If he does, I can stop and...
no, go ahead. We'll go back to him. Yes.
Okay. I wanted to also correct the record because earlier it was stated that Assad was a darling of the West. With due respect, in past 13 years, when civil war was going on, he wasn't anything of the sort. He was very close to two governments. One is Russia, the other one that we know is Iran. So you cannot say that UK or the US would be his fans. His education, his academic career might be whatever it might be.
At the time of Tony Blair.
13 years ago, civil war actually started after that, right? Yeah. So, by the way, regarding the situation in Syria, Sana, let us start with 3 rules of thumb that actually are based on common sense. Number 1, whenever civil war actually takes place, the country is divided into 2 halves, right? And in the end, when one side actually wins, it is natural that the other side must feel the heat. And there must be some displacement. We have heard reports that there are people who are actually trickling out to Lebanon. So there's always going to be that kind of a fact. On the second rule of thumb is that even if today you cannot feel the fault lines in the society, they don't go away. They are always there, ready to explode at a second's notice. The third rule of thumb is that if you cannot hear or read or see the reports of those fault lines actually acting up, it doesn't mean that they have disappeared. So what exactly does it lead to? It means that even at this moment, when we are actually watching CNN remarkably going out of the way to celebrate the way one regime has fallen, and I love the kind of cognitive dissonance of CNN particularly, because 20 years ago I want to have a time machine and take all this footage and show it to the CNN's movers and shakers 20 years ago when war and terror was going on, to think that they would be celebrating an affiliate or an offshoot of Al-Qaeda actually taking over in Syria. And then one realizes that all the hypocrisy in the Western media has been exposed because of Trump, because of so many other things. But here too, they have shown their true colors. And they will actually have to continue to pay the price. They are diminishing already in their size. Even as we speak, there must be houses in Syria that are badly adversely affected by the change, and there must be fear. And on the Western media, I haven't seen any sort of that kind of reporting at all, right? So unfortunately, this is Western media, so-called liberal, moderate media for you. Now let us talk about the state of affairs. Because of all this pain and hurt that might be there, wars seldom actually leave behind any kind of healthy, wealthy people. Even as we speak, even those who are victorious, they must also have gone through the grinder. So circumstances are bad. They are not going to improve that quickly. Turkey's role in helping, Syria, that actually reminds me of another chapter from history, and that is Pakistan under Ziaul Haq, when we were actually not only decided to host Afghan muhajirin or refugees for that matter, and at that time Pakistan was also supporting the Afghan jihad, so to speak, right? And what happened was that immediately everybody said, when Russia actually withdrew, that things are going to be hunky-dory, and Pakistan has had a moral victory. And then there was Brigadier Yusuf actually wrote that book, that fateful book that would later be used to end kind of indictment of Pakistan, called Bear Trap. But after that we saw General Zia's plane crashed and everything went awry. So at this moment also, I think that the net victim is going to be Turkey. And I recommend to given what happened to General Ziaul Haq, I request to my friends in Turkey to actually take special care of their leader, because I think that if there are forces of chaos in the world, they would actually try to take him out as well. But at this moment, when it comes to net benefit or victors, it is one country is actually really jumping with joy, and that is called Israel. But apart from that, other countries in the region are going to be net losers, victims, and they will know, because all these fault lines will keep on acting up. And in coming days, I don't think that these are religious parties, even with the Taliban formula. By the way, I have another very interesting comment to make, and that is about the US government, right? The US administration, this is for the second time, the intelligence has informed them what is going to happen, and they have been all totally on the money. In Ukraine, they were telling us this is going to happen, and that happened. Similarly, in Syria also, they started predicting that within days, Assad regime is going to fall, and that happened. Now, question in my mind is, if your intelligence is so good, what happened in Afghanistan? Why did you not see that coming? So it is going to actually fuel another campaign in Donald Trump's camp, and that is to take care of what happened in Afghanistan as well.
Right. Ambassador, I want your take on that as well, particularly the US perspective with reference to the situation in Syria at the moment. And while, of course, there are other international players involved, and now, of course, with the new presidency coming in the US, what will be the likelihood in terms of the way that they're monitoring the situation, in terms of the way that they're going to interact with the dynamic with Israel, and then, of course, the evolving situation in Syria?
Sana, I would like to little digress. I think we shouldn't look at this crisis or any other crisis which confronts Muslims and Arabs from necessarily lens of conspiracies or there are several names they give it to some of our analysts. So I don't think so. I think it'll be good and safe for us to really do some kind of a self-assessment as a ummah, even as analysts, wishing to see a peaceful Middle East, wishing to see a prosperous Middle East, wishing to see a democratic Middle East. I think we have to look at what was wrong. So I think now what US will do, I think that is a question that not many people are able to bet even a dime because of what is termed as the total a calculated unpredictability of the next president, that is Mr. Trump. Now, what he will do, I mean, he has promised that he'll he doesn't want to be part of any conflict. In fact, his statement was interesting that whatever is happening in Syria is none of our business. It's not America's business. So he wants to leave it to the regional actors. But still, as we know, that in the south, there is a U.S. Army presence. Will he withdraw? That's the question. Will he persuade Israel to come on a honorable and a sustainable peace? I think the biggest challenge, in my view, which has emerged out of this Syria, is that will there be more Syria around after this Syria, or is this enough, or will it be more Gaza and South Lebanon massacres as enough? So these are the kind of questions, fundamental, moral, political, social, that I think the leadership in all the countries, and especially those who matter, have to address. I think we as kind of innocent, just scholars, feel that enough is enough. Enough blood has been shed. Now it has been over 75 years of this war going on in the Middle East, this innocent people thrown out of their countries. I think it should be a wake-up call for those who really want to see this world to be peaceful. If not, other alternative is really very dangerous, because if now, for example, as we heard his statement, the Syrian leader, Mr. Al-Golani, and that he would not allow, he was very unequivocal, that he would not allow other countries, including Iran, to be interfering and exploiting the social and sectarian fault lines in our country. So what will happen to that? What will happen to the infrastructure, although depleted, of Hezbollah and Hamas? What will happen to that? And all those militias which are still operative in Iraq. So I think US and all other people who have global role, they also have a global responsibility. So I think we as a people, we as a well-wishers of the Middle East, and we kind of spiritually and intellectually, despite being in the South Asia, feel part of the Middle East, should really work, not only think about it, but work towards that objective, that the ways have to be found for a peaceful solution of this long-standing Middle East problem. And of course, the core is the legitimate rights of Palestinians, which are definitely been reiterated several times in the UN Security Council, Oslo Accord, Camp David Accord, whatever, all the agreements. So I think somebody has to really sit down and tell Israel that that dream of a greater Israel, they might be able to impose on the dent of the power, but definitely it will not be a sustainable reality. Of course, they want to make believe and create a reality, but that reality would be not sustainable, as several other accords have been, as we have seen in our these past several decades.
Absolutely. And Ambassador Saab, I understand that, but I also want to quickly get Umar's opinion on this matter as well. While, of course, this is something that we're looking for, but who's really going to do that given the current dynamics, given the way that we've seen different countries interact, with big powers interact, and the fact that there are so many obvious and direct things, and in the ways that the international community is interacting despite whatever is happening in the front. Where are we really relying on the hopes for this change in these countries and this region for that to actually take place?
I think that one thing which is very important is that this transition government, which has now been made, at least gets the humanitarian aid and to help with the reconstruction efforts. At least the basic municipalities, they get the resources, because right now Syria is a war-torn country. So all of its, I would say, sectors, they are in a very bad state. And it's very important that particularly the Arab Gulf states, they, in coordination with Turkey and Jordan, they can, of course, help quite a lot. And I think that things are going towards that side as we see it. The other positives, so there are negatives and positives. As Farrukh Sahib was saying, that we don't see reports of revenge attacks or such things. They have happened. Some of them have happened. But we also need to understand that there were some figureheads which were called Shabih, which were created by this regime, which were kind of local warlords, the kind of which emerged after the Soviet withdrawal in Afghanistan. And I don't think so that their communities will leave them without justice. So some of those people are being killed. We have seen footages. But on the other hand, there are certain other interesting aspects of the Syrian society that within the Alawites, it was the Assad and Makhluf, the ruling family. They were basically kind of parasites and feeding upon the whole society, the whole nation, while actually majority of the Alawites, they live in quite abject poverty. So this is something which a lot of Syrians know, which the Sunnis also understand, that these people, they were working for the regime because these were the crumbs which the regime was throwing at them. Otherwise, they would not survive at all. And I think this is something where because some of the regime figures, what I have seen, they were basically executed by their own communities and not by the rebels or not by outsiders. There is all there The Christians in Syria. They always have a very good repute, and their relationship with the other Syrian communities and sects have always been quite impressive. I also heard about the Ismaili community living in Salamia, and my Syrian friends were saying that they are very highly educated and very impressive in their careers, in their general outlook, and very much admired generally by Syrians. Also, I think that with the Druze, the population, because the Druze had been continuously supporting revolutionary mobilization and action, and especially in the last 2 years, it was only the Druze which were doing these protests. So there is also hope there that they might be able to get some sort of autonomy, and they will have a positive relationship with the government in Damascus. And I guess that at the end of the day, there is at least no institutionalized driven approach towards revenge or towards mass scale attacks on a certain community. The Republican Guards base, which is right in the heart of Damascus, when the rebels approached, they told those Republican Guards, majority Alawites, take the buses and go back to your homes. We are not here to take revenge. So these are some of the positives. But of course, it's a country in ruins, and still it's functioning in war economy. So transitioning from a war to a stable economy, and other than that, all the possible future struggles between rebel groups will also challenge the future of the country.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Umar Karim, for joining us, and Ambassador G.R. Baluch for being part of this discussion. Farrukh, you have 1 minute to add something.
Right. I would rather now we shift to the next topic because
Great.
we have very limited window, right?
We do, yes. Yeah. So we're going to take a look at the stock exchange very quickly also, and I'll come back to you on that because there seems to be a change in trend. We had a positive trajectory, and then we had a plunging of a lot of the points going down. And while, of course, we've spoken about how this may not be the best indicator in terms of what is going on in the economy, I want your take on what that means in terms of why this fluctuation exists, and then also in terms of the potential of the interest rate going down. Are we seeing that anytime soon?
Right. Sana, I think that one of the things that are actually defining the current momentum forward is the expectation that the interest rates are going to come down. And because of that, a lot of hopes and expectations are pinned on that. Apart from that, also, there are certain dynamics like cement sector, other sectors, right? Electricity sectors. In those sectors also, because there are expectations of certain announcements, because of that, things actually keep on building up momentum. Of course, there isn't even one stock market in the world that can say that tomorrow is going to be very stable and things cannot fluctuate. But right now, I think that when it comes to Pakistan's business community and investors, especially in Pakistan's singular bourse, I think that their sentiment actually reflects the health of the country's economy as well. And I think that we are moving in a better direction. I hope that in coming days we keep on seeing this ascent. Now, last week actually I spoke about Pakistan, stock exchange crossing 110,000, and now we have actually. So now everybody is going to look at the next mental barrier, and that is 1,25,000. So with that kind of expectations, if I can actually hope and see or expect that, that means that our stock market is moving in the right direction and the economy is also appreciating, is getting better.
All right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. As always, that's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.